Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon, and Cleveland, Ohio. We have over 700 books, over 25 employees, and we make about 40 new books every year. And we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or maybe you just want to understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to diagnose the big one. What is the biggest problem in publishing?
Joe, what is the biggest problem?
Wait, me? Oh, no, crap.
I have no such
I
grandiose
really
ideas.
should have prepared.
I'm a small problems person.
Okay.
You're the big.
What are
you're
the
big
smallest
picture person.
problems in publishing?
Staples, paper cuts,
That's true.
bad bindings, attitudes about money.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's a bigger one, I guess.
Right, refusing to look at failures and learn from them.
Yeah, that's like a
Is
medium
that too
sized
profound?
problem.
Too deep? Too
I'm trying to
biting?
think of really small ones.
Oh.
I think office supply chain issues.
Running out of rubber bands, which we did today.
Ooh, printer jams.
Printer jams. Well, okay, fine.
What's the biggest one?
The biggest problem in publishing is that there are too many books.
Oh, too many books.
And
This sounds like a heresy.
5 years ago, when the People's Guide to Publishing book came out, which is wild enough to think that that was 5 years
That was
ago,
5
when
years
we're
ago.
coming up on a second edition here,
Wow.
there were a million new books coming out per year and 15 million books in print in the back catalog. So every year there's more books. Now that number has increased 30 to 50% in the span of,
Wow.
only 5 years.
So there's 1.3 to 1.5 million books coming out a year.
Correct. Excellent math.
It wasn't actually that complicated.
That's not one. Ellie's math is not one of the biggest problems in publishing.
No, my math is all right. I caught a payroll error yesterday
Well then, there you go.
that you missed.
Oh, very well. I didn't look at it very closely, but yes,
the battle.
I did. Right, looking closely.
That's how you see the small problems.
Biggest solution in publishing.
Do you see our sort of yin and yang going on?
So
Sometimes at war.
yeah, and I think this is the thing where like we run into this all the time, where a book. The same book that came out today could have come out in the 80s and sold 30 to 50,000 copies, and today you'd be lucky to sell 5,000.
Right.
And so it's just a different sort of thing, and you have to be better at it and that.
Right.
And
lucky in some ways as well.
I do think, and this is just me spitballing here. I have zero scientific evidence to back this up besides the remainder lists. But I am going to put it out as a prediction that these 3 to 5 pandemic years, not to put a lifetime in the pandemic, but that's kind of the amount of how the shakeout will affect things. We're going to see the same thing happen that happened to bookstores in 2007 with the recession are now going to happen to publishers, and the publishers that aren't running well-oiled ships are going to disappear, and we're going to have a series of well-run publishers, because there's just not whereas before you could screw around a little bit, you could be like, oh well, I know this book's not going to make any money, and it's just going to cost us $10,000, and I'm going to do it anyway, and that's your prerogative as a publisher. And then you would likely be made up by a different book that earned out an extra $10,000, and you're like, okay, all in a day's work. But now you're facing increased paper costs and labor shortages and very long turnaround times and shorter attention spans and, just like increasingly difficult expectations to fulfill. And so, I'm definitely getting a lot of like kind of slapdash work that I see coming across my desk, not from our own staff, but like from other publishers, people that are like sharing it with me for, to be like, what is this? Can you believe this? Or just books that like, weren't really thought through, I guess, like either like weren't well executed because like everybody's a little fatigued, or just weren't really, and I think we've probably said this before, like the worst thing you can really do is like do something that feels inauthentic as a cash grab, because it will backfire. Because people want authenticity in their publishing.
Yeah. So, like, what's the advice for the publishers listening to this podcast?
So,
for addressing the biggest problem in publishing?
And I feel like, to some degree, we have kind of fallen into this, but then we kind of fell back out. We published more books in 2012 than we did in 2022?
Yeah, that was a 50-book year, wasn't it?
I don't think it was quite that many. It was 42 versus... I think we did 39 last year.
Those are very precise numbers.
I may or may not have just recently written a blog post. But, so it's not a huge difference, but it's a huge difference in terms of execution. Like, the books that we did in 2022, we had a much bigger staff. Mm-hmm. We did fewer books. Mm-hmm. And, we just didn't have the level of errors that we did in 2012.
We had a decade of expertise and experience and seeing our failures and seeing our successes.
Yeah. And so... But I think the thing that we did most is we listened to the feedback of our fans and our audience.
Yeah.
And when they said, I would really, and a lot of times, like, we recently did a TikTok, and, like, in the comments, there would be, like, comments that were like, hey, you should do this, or what about this? And we're like, ooh, yes, we will do that.
Great idea, everybody.
And it's like, I was telling this to a group of publishers the other day where I was like, the thing about your customers... even, this was the language we were using at that time, is they're quite free with their opinions and their feedback. So, what better opportunity than the people that, like, are already your patrons to tell you what they would expect or want from you, And I think that's really the advice, is, like, listen to them. And I've fallen into this before where I'm like, this is the direction that culture needs to shift, so I'm gonna like attempt that with a forced hand. And and like, yes, but also no.
Yeah.
Like, you want to be the one that's like, you can angle that in with other projects or in other ways. Like, you don't want to be like putting in your personal interest or tastes too hard, because that's not necessarily what a publisher is or does. How's that for heavy-handed?
I feel like that's actionable advice. Interpretable, but...
Everybody wants to think they're on the right side of that one.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
on Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub,
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.